Welcome to the Ultimate Farm Wife podcast. On this channel, we're going to be discussing all things marrying a farmer, moving to the land, and becoming integrated with a family farming operation. Whether you're moving to the farm for the first time or whether you're moving back into a family farming operation, we discuss the ins and the outs of all of it. So let's jump into today's episode. Welcome to another episode of The Ultimate Farm Wife. I'm Katja Williams, your host, and today we're talking with Melinda. Melinda, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and having a chat with us.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and what it is that you do.
Yes, such a big question, really. So I do a number of things like you. My work role, I sit in the role of a director and principal clinical psychologist of a private practice, which I established back in 2017 now. And so it's been running for a number of years. And 2017 was a very interesting time because it was a time that Medicare recognized rural and remote individuals. And so they were offering telehealth or telephone sessions for those in our rural communities. And 2017 was a time where we still were using 3G. We didn't really know how video calls worked. And to get reception, to download a platform, to get a video call, the usernames were astronomical. They were so long and convoluted. And so that was back in 2017. And so thankfully, technology has evolved and changed. And so within the psychology practice, we offer telehealth sessions, which are way more efficient, approachable, and just so much easier of access these days compared to 2017. So I sit in that role. I also sit in the role of lecturer and supervisor at the University of New England. So working with psychology students, working with masters of psychology students, so finishing their final years of psychology, focusing on rural and remote psychology, what that looks like. Sit in the role of a mentor with the Country Education Foundation, looking at young students moving into the psychology space and helping them to transition from rural communities into metro areas where the universities are. That's the supervisor, lots of other things, guest speaker, all that kind of fun stuff in my workspace. I also, outside of my workspace, I sit in the role of mum, which I've got some great stories about. And so I've got twin boys who are 5 and a little girl who is 7. And so that keeps me very busy. And my husband, Phil, who I've got some really great stories about as well, which I will often share when I'm talking. Yeah.
Absolutely. Melinda, when were you first, you're based at Narrabri?
Yes.
So tell me about living rural and remote and your connection to agriculture and how that led you to be involved in the Harvest Her Power conference.
Yeah. So born and raised in Narrabri, have circled the globe and then have ended back up in Narrabri. Born and raised on a farm, generational farm. And I remember moving through kind of primary school and high school thinking, oh, I never want to come back here. I'm way too cool. I'm way too cool for this rural country town. See you later. I'm never coming back. And then as the years tick by, the thought started to grow where it's like, oh, maybe I do want to come back. Maybe actually, no, I do want to come back. And we were living in Sydney at the time, and Phil, my husband's English, and so we were in London and then Sydney, and then we were about to have our first baby. And I said to Phil, I think I want to move back to the farm. I think it's time. Phil said no. I said yes. So we moved back. So we moved back, and yes, and so growing up on the farm, incredible experience. Very grateful to my mum and dad and the extended family. And this was a time in rural towns where we had a TV that had maybe 3 or 4 channels that worked some of the time, that we were on landline phones, and we were in a way just quite isolated from town. We were 60, 70 k's out of town, but such a wonderful experience. It was such a great community. There was things like the community cricket club. We played polo cross, just these wonderful adventures. And now that I'm in this adult role, now that I'm more grown up and realize of how things such as gender biases and gender expectations and things like that I was so fortunate when growing up with my mum and dad that I didn't even know about any of that. I was often told that girls can do as much as what boys can, that you can ride a horse, you can drive a tractor just as well as the boys can, so off you go. And so then coming out into the real world, that I was really quite surprised by that, and how much that still is very much around. So that's kind of my childhood, droving, riding horses, wranglers, utes, things like that. It was wonderful. And no social media. So that didn't exist at all. So it was wonderful. I remember getting dial up internet. That was a
That
wild
sound.
time. Yeah, that sound, that sound. And then when someone wanted to use a landline phone, the internet would cut out and we didn't really know what the internet was. And so it was a really wonderful time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So being back on farm, Melinda,
Mm.
how has that changed the way that you and Phil operate on a day-to-day basis? What does your everyday look like?
Yes. Busy. Busy. And so I sit in the role of psychologist. So whilst that the farm is there, but it's that we are very much not kind of operating on the farm. And so what that looks like for us, and kind of working within that rural community still, and understanding what that rural community needs, being Narrabri, be involved, showing up, and just the day to day. Even in the psychology space, I remember when I was about 16 or 17, and I said to mum and dad, I think there's this thing called psychology, or I think I might be interested in that. And I didn't even know how to spell the word psychology back then. And that took me the first year or so of uni to learn how to spell that. And that was a time where psychology wasn't spoken about. It was that, well, what is that? And even now that I've got a couple of older uncles who kind of sidestep me because they think I can read their mind through psychology and being a psychic, which I'm definitely not. So that was a really interesting time. Parents are very supportive of it and said, yep, go for it. We'll be here. We'll support you all the way. We don't know what it is that you're doing, but sure, do it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely love that. So we connected when we were both on Ducks on a Pond and we
Yeah.
shared an episode together.
Yes.
And it was so funny because when the episode went live, we hadn't met, we hadn't spoken, but
No.
we connected afterwards.
Yes,
So that was so lovely. So social media and podcasting is great for things like
it is.
that.
It is.
And we ended up talking about this conference. I had this
Yeah.
great idea about a conference that I wanted to put together, and I wanted it to be for rural and remote women in
Mm-hmm.
agriculture who
Yeah.
are on the farm, who are integrating into or back into a family farming business,
Yes.
no matter what their role was
Yeah.
in that family farming business. We wanted somewhere that they could come to be able to do personal development and pick
Mm-hmm.
up actual tangible skills
Yeah.
that no matter what role they're in, they will have a better journey and a better, lifestyle on farm.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we, after speaking for a while, we came up with your topic. So tell us
Yeah.
the topic that you rolled out at this year's Harpster Power Conference.
Yes. So all of the above of what you've said is that that's what drew me to you and to this conference, in that it's so real and authentic. I think there are so many conferences and workshops and training seminars, and that you walk away and think, what did I learn? Like, what, I've got this pamphlet, I've got this flyer now, what is this? This is not real. This is not applicable to my real life. This is not workable. And so that's what really drew me to you, is that, one, how real and wonderful you are, but the idea of how to deliver education, knowledge, and also that incredible depth of understanding to women who live in rural communities, and how different that is to metro communities, and which is totally fine. We're not saying what's better, what's worse. There is a difference, and having that recognition that there is a difference is incredibly powerful. So that's where I jumped on your journey, and I'm very thankful for that. And so when I spoke this year, I spoke about identity, roles, and values, and what that actually looks like in real life, because they're really wonderful terms, but it's like, well, what do they actually mean? What is that? So we're looking at that of the values. And so that first component of that would be understanding who you are, what what's important to you and what's not important to you. And I think that's a really important check-in that us as women do on a regular basis, because we think about the incredible milestones that we move through as women, from school, high school, university, training, going back to the farm, moving out to a farm, child, kind of birth, pregnancy, being a mom, which is a whole wild ride in itself. There are so many wild milestones and big milestones that we meet here as women. And so it's then understanding, well, what's actually important to me? If I'm stepping into a family farm that's not my family, what's my values? What is important to me? What if their value of, say, that we look at that of a value of integrity is very important, and that they are then doing behaviors behind that. However, that doesn't quite align with us in terms of our value of honesty. So how do we then move within that? So that's what we're talking about with values, and how important that is to have those regular check-ins with self to say, hey, actually, how does this work in real life? How does this impact the decisions I'm making, the situations I'm living in, the relationships that I'm in? And also understanding, why do I keep kind of headbutting in that conversation, or having conflict within that family? Is it because our values don't align? So what do I do then with that? If my values don't align, how do I get around that? How do I problem solve around that, as opposed to kind of coming in head on and say, well, what do I do with that? Then we move into that of identity, and which is the kind of the second component of values, is that, well, who am I? Which is a really common question that I have, particularly in the therapy space, but also conversations outside of the therapy space, is that, well, who am I? So we talk about these incredible women who perhaps are not from farming backgrounds or not from rural backgrounds, and they move or marry or move into these family backgrounds or family communities and family relationships. And so, well, who am I? Like, where do I fit into this? What is my role? How do I fit into this? How do I work with things that are challenges and barriers that still exist, such as gender biases, generational expectations and beliefs? How do I work within that? If this isn't my upbringing, if this isn't my childhood experience is very different to that, how do I fit into that? But then also it's that women now who have grown up and have gone away to study, and then have come back or have stayed on the farm, and said, well, where do I fit into that? And how do I operate with that? We know that, particularly around gender, that men, we see more male farmers, or recognize more male farmers, but where do women fit into that? There are conversations where I've had where that we've got incredible women directors of farming assets and farming properties now, and they'll tell stories about how that they'll have contractors coming onto the farm, and the contractors will say, oh, is your husband home? Can I talk to him about that? Or maybe you should go and check with your husband before we sign up with anything. Or, like, did your husband say that was okay? Yet they were in the role of director, and actually in those instances the husband actually has moved to the family farm, and the husband has no idea what's going on. And there's these women that are telling me these stories, and then they say, sure, you can go and ask him, but he won't know, by all means. And that's 2025 that this is still happening. So again, it's understanding that importance of identity, roles, and also those values, but then understanding the challenges and the barriers that come with that as well. Yeah, so that's a very long-winded answer to what we talked about, but that's the things that we touched about, which are very important.
No, I absolutely love that. And I have an interview with Elaine coming out as well. Elaine was one of the participants who came to the conference, and she said between, Melinda's talk on and workshop on this that she's just explained, paired with my know your timings on farm, and going through on that big annual look right down to season, week, task. She was like, oh my gosh, I am on the farm. I am involved in the farm. So if you haven't heard that interview, go back and listen to it.
Listen to that.
It links all the sessions together in these light bulb moments that she had. And many other participants who were there at the conference had the same thing. They were like, oh my goodness, I just needed these dots to line up to realize that this is my role. And it's
Yes.
okay. I am enough. I am doing enough.
That's it. That's it. And I think that also then moves into that the expectation, or there's a belief or myth there still around a farm wife and what a farm wife does and the role that a farm wife does play and the value of a farm wife. And often there still is this myth or this belief that that's a negative thing, or that's, oh, well, you're just the farm wife, like that's your role and that's all you do, which is absolutely not true. It's that without incredible women such as yourself and the women that we're talking to, the farming doesn't exist. The farming community future does not exist in any way, shape, or form. It goes hand in hand. So it's not. It's also then us challenging those myths and those beliefs that are still very much around of these roles that women do play.
Tickets are now on sale for the Harvest Her Power Empowerment and Skills Conference, right here at the Taronga Western Plains Zoo in Dubbo, New South Wales, on February 23rd and 24th of 2026. Purchase your tickets in the link below, and I look forward to seeing you there. This conference is for all women in agriculture involved in family farming businesses, no matter your role, no matter what stage of the journey you're on. This conference is for you. I'll see you there.
Yep.
We even had daughters of the farmers who had come to the session and they either have integrated back into the family farming business successfully, or they're trying to navigate that and they're trying to work out the role from being the daughter to then being taken serious as a professional partner in the business. Now, it's not always easy for sons either to be able to break through that barrier.
No.
But for some reason, the daughters are still, we know from research, especially the report that came out of UNE last year by Lucy Newcomb, that only 10% of farm daughters are even considered in succession planning. So it was so lovely for even the daughters of farmers who had participated in the conference to say, I have more of an idea about where I want to sit in my family business and how I want to approach and talk to my family about this once they'd been, especially to your workshop, and worked out, okay, what are my values? Who am I? What do I want to do? Because I think sometimes that's the step that we overlook. We try and bounce into other parts of the farm where we think we should be, or where we see that there's many gaps, and you try and fill them all. But what's something that's going to work for you? That's
right. And what works for you will be different to what your neighbours do, to what the neighbours on this side do, and what the neighbours on that side do. And that's incredibly important, is that when we're talking about roles and identity and values, it's that what works for you is different to what works for other people, and that's okay. We don't need to follow the footsteps of those people on either side of us. And so a really nice metaphor of that is that it's like that when you're walking along the beach and you're walking along in the sand, and say you've got someone in front of you and you can see their footsteps in the sand, and then you try to trace that, or you try to step into their footsteps. And it doesn't matter how hard you try, it doesn't matter how much you try to focus and concentrate on putting your feet into those footprints, it will never be the same. It never will be. So again, it's bringing back to the expectations of, okay, well, how do I do this differently? Or how do I use that knowledge or use that lived experience to then work with a model that works for my family, for myself as well?
So Melinda, we've had an incredible first year taking up with the conference. What was your favorite part about the conference, and why did you say yes to coming on the committee with me for the 2026 conference?
Yes. So the takeaway from the conference is how important connection and networking is in our life, is that rural communities can be incredibly isolating. We're seeing through research time and time again, one of the big social factors that are impacting us is the feeling of loneliness or being alone. And the further you move from a metro area and the further you move out to rural, regional, rural and remote, that feeling of loneliness pops up time and time again. And it's a very powerful emotion that sees a lot of behaviors, interactions, reactions occurring, and often not positive. So we see things such as mental health conditions, we see things such as financial strain. There's a whole plethora of impacts based on that feeling of loneliness. So this conference in particular was incredible, and how powerful that connection was and that support network was. It's that establishing those connections and those friendships to say, hey, like, I'm not feeling great, or I have a question around how this works, or I'm not sure how to operate that on the farm, or actually what software are you using, what it is that, or how do you do the bus run, and how do you do time, how do you do schedules. It's those kind of questions that you have to have a network to reach out to flick that text message to flick that message to say, hey, what are your thoughts, what are your perspective. And that's the very powerful thing that was seen at this conference. And they're lasting. They're friendships and networks now that might not touch base with each other on a regular basis, but they're there now. It's that, oh, I know that person, or I know that person, I can reach out to them. Actually, that person said that, or that person was working in that industry, I didn't know that. And so that's how important this conference was to continue that and to see that development of that. Incredible, and challenging all that, the loneliness and all that kind of stuff there as well. The second part of that is that why did I come back is because, like I said, is that I truly believe in you. I believe in the conference, and our values align. So that's always good. Talking to a psychologist, it's always good when our values align. But I think the original idea that you had with this conference is so real and authentic. And I keep coming back to that the market for conferences and training, it's so super saturated these days. There is so much there. So, well, what do I go to? What do I invest in? Because it takes time, it takes money. You're off the farm, you're off your industry, you're off your role in terms of attending a conference like that. If I want to go to a conference, I want to make it worthwhile, because it's a big commitment. Who's looking after my kids? Who's looking after the animals? Who's looking after the farm, the relationship, my older parents? Like, who's doing that? So to commit to going to a 2-day conference is a big ask. And so the investment of this conference is incredible because of not only the take homes, the people that are running it, the workshops, the different types of workshops, everything that this brings. It's a kind of one-stop shop, and you walk away with an incredible bag full of tools and knowledge and networks. So that's why I've come back.
Absolutely love that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Melinda. Melinda, you're coming back on as a speaker and a workshop host for 2026. Tell us
Yes.
a little bit about your workshop. So
Yes.
The theme for 2026 is the light at the end of the tunnel, and you're talking about intimacy and relationships on farm.
Yeah. There's how to do relationships and do dating, and how to step out of a textbook where it says, oh, to look after your relationship you do A, B, and C, and how does that actually work when you're in harvest season, and how does that actually work when you're in the depths of calving and all that kind of stuff. Like, how does that actually work? So we will be talking about relationships and the different milestones of relationships and what that looks like. I was talking to you before about there's this thing, and I'll give a little kind of a taster of what I'll be talking about. There's an incredible questionnaire that was written back in 1933 for husbands to ask their wives and wives to ask their husbands. And some of these questions are asking husbands about how do I please you and look after you, and how do I dress for your style and color, and the husbands asking their wives, do I allocate you enough money so that you can do some hobbies and interests, and do I share half of my recreational time with you? And so these questions are back from 1933, and so we're talking about the development of that over the course of time, the roles within relationships, but then also in reality of 2025, how do we look after relationships? What does that actually look like? The dynamics. We'll be talking about intimacy. We'll be talking about how intimacy changes throughout relationships, from when we're kind of hot and excited with each other when we first start dating, to that of you're 3 or 4 kids in, what does intimacy actually look like, and the expectations of that, how to manage relationships when there are some times where you don't actually like your partner, and so some moments where you're like, oh, you are annoying, I don't like you. And how do you actually move through that and make that a normal experience, rather than saying, well, you should just be in love all the time, and that just hold hands and skip down the road, and you're in love. So that's a kind of a really broad overview of what we'll be talking about. I promise I will shape that up as we get closer to the conference, but it's the reality of relationships in farming communities, dating in farming communities, relationship separation, where everyone knows everybody, things like that. The real kind of the reality of relationships, and how to move through them as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And how we can look after ourselves and each other when we go
Yes.
through crisis situations
Yeah.
such as drought and flooding and succession talks. All of
Yes,
that will be covered.
absolutely. Absolutely. And things that also that are in relationships, such as fertility, childbirth, when there's been a crisis event, or when there's been a death within the family. And so how to continue to look after your relationship, to move through the darkness of a tunnel, and to what the outside of that tunnel actually looks like when you move through that darkness. And so we talk about this, the light at the end of the tunnel, is that for me what comes to mind is a train tunnel, where there are moments where there are darkness, there are moments where the electricity might cut out, there are moments where you think, this is a big deal, I don't know if I can do this. We then talk about how to navigate that and move through that tunnel, and what that other side looks like as well. And that other side can be roses and daffodils, but the other side can be not. So how do I deal with that, and how do I manage that as well? So, and how do I deal with going through several tunnels time and time again, and how does that impact us as well?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Amazing topic.
Yeah.
Lots to get into. So we're very
Yes.
lucky that we'll have you for, 2 hours, and then you'll be there for the 2 days as well.
Yeah.
So if
Yes.
anyone wants to follow up with you after your session. And that's another thing
Absolutely.
that is so great about the Harvest Her Power conference is the speakers and workshop hosts are there for the entire 2 days, and the cocktail party on the Monday night. They are not fly in, fly outs.
No.
We are there to have these connections, to
Yeah.
go over the deeper dives, to talk about something that you may have questions for. I've said it before and I'll say it again. It was one of the most interactive conferences I have ever been at, where people were happy to open up and be raw and be exposed about
And be
specific
safe and
and be
safe.
safe about specifics that they needed to know for their circumstance, for their farm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, and that safety is there, is that there are some moments where we will be touching on vulnerable topics, or vulnerabilities will come to the surface. And yet, through this conference, we've created this really nice, safe space to do that. So it's that what happens at the conference stays at the conference, in terms of that it won't be repeated if there is disclosures or vulnerabilities. It won't be laughed at, or you're kind of shamed, where it's like, oh, don't bring that up, that's embarrassing, don't talk about that. So it's a really safe space for that learning, and the takeaways are incredible as well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Melinda, what advice, tips, tricks, or hacks would you leave the audience with in the lead up to the conference before they get to see your next session?
Yes. Grab the tickets when they become available. Early bird special, amazing. Do that. And I think not only do register and kind of work out the logistics of how to actually get to the conference, where it might be babysitting, accommodation, travel, how do I actually make that work? If you're traveling interstate, how do I actually look at, say, flights? Do I need to book flights now? Because rather than waiting to that last moment, where we know rural flights can be so expensive in those last minutes. So look at flights, accommodation, the logistics of that. And in regards to that, of what we're talking about with relationships and within farming communities, farming families, it's then starting to think about, well, what would I want to learn about? What do I want to get out of those sessions? What do I want to learn? What is my relationship? How many relationships am I in terms of my partner, my family, my family-in-law? There are multiple different relationships we're in every single day, and looking at that role that we do play in those different relationships. So starting to reflect on that, starting to think about, well, what do I want to get out of that workshop? I think that would be a great starting point.
Yeah, if you have questions, don't be afraid to bring them along with you.
Yeah.
And because we understand that we are all women, and most of us, that means that we are the primary carers of our children, there will be a
Yes.
children's corner again at the conference this year.
Yes. incredible, which is an incredible thing to be thinking about, because there are times where that we are the primary caregivers, and what do we do with kids? What do we do with our kids? We can't leave them in the car or leave them back home with a couple of biscuits saying, I hope you're there when I get back. So these are very important factors that they're being considered with this conference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, thank you so much for coming on with us. We
look forward
to seeing you at the conference, and we'll talk to you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Ultimate Farm Wife podcast. A huge thank you goes out to our show editor, Krista Pathrath, CEO of the Rural Podcasting Network, helping rural entrepreneurs share their voice online. You can learn more about Krista and the Rural Podcasting Co. at their website in the show notes below. And to our creative powerhouse, Dakota Gorey, CEO, or as she likes to call it, the Creative Experience Officer of CGC Design. With over 5 years of experience in marketing, social media management, and website design, Dakota is passionate about helping businesses and brands of all sizes find their voice and stand out online. And Lou and her team at the Administration Agency, and of course to yourselves who tune in every week. Want to know more about her work or about Krista and how you can get involved? Make sure you're using the links in the show notes below. I'm Katja Williams, and this has been the Ultimate Farm Wife podcast. Until next time, take care, be kind, and keep showing up for your farm, your family, and yourself. I'll see you in another episode. Before you go, if you've been loving these farm life chats, I'd love for you to join me over on my other podcast too. It's called Absolutely Fabulous, where we dive into agriculture beyond the headlines and bridging the urban-rural divide. We'll deep dive into big conversations in ag, from the challenges to the highlights and what's shaping our future. It's a space where honest stories, laughter, and a good dose of farm life real talk goes on. So make sure to head to the link in the show notes, subscribe to the Absolutely Fabulous, and I'll play the intro for you now.
Hi, welcome to Absolutely Fabulous. My name is Gillian Fennell, also known as Station Mum 101. I love everything about agriculture, especially the people, and especially communicating about what makes Australian ag so special.
And I'm Katja Williams, a beef, cattle and cropping farmer, and I love all things ag, and I'm also known as the Ultimate Farm Wife. Together, we are Absolutely Fabulous, and we are talking all things agriculture beyond the headlines.
And we can't wait to give our opinion to you, and we hope you enjoy it.